Hello and welcome. My name is Christian. I'm a pre-sales technician from Heimdal, and I'm here today to show you how you can limit admin access to endpoint devices. You can both limit the access, but you can also lock the access, meaning that you can live up to a lot of the different compliance frameworks like GDPR, Cyber Essentials, NIST, and so on. We have our module called Privilege Elevation Delegation Management, where you can control these things. Everything is based on one agent. So in order to configure the devices, you can see we go to the endpoint settings here, and we have the possibility to differentiate the behavior of the agents installed on the endpoint devices by giving out different policies. The policies are controlled here, and we can both prioritize the policies and we can also assign the policies on a lot of different parameters. If we, for example, want to look at this policy I've built here, we can see that we have a lot of general settings, and normally we recommend having multiple policies. So you can use one for IT for testing, and you can use one for the C-level people, and perhaps also one for the people that are traveling and so on. That is something you can configure by assigning the policies and configure them so they fit the different needs. Let's go directly to the privilege and app control here, where we can see the settings. First of all, we need to enable this module. This is done just by clicking here, and then we can go into details on how we want this to work, on how flexible we want to be. So the first one we see here is that there's the possibility to deny elevation of system files. This is really up for discussion. It is, for example, PowerShell, or if you want to limit the access to command line. And it is a little bit of a problem if you allow elevation of these, because they can be used to gain access to areas of the operating system that you don't want the end users to do. We have a lot of different things we can set here. We can also increase the access to these services by demanding multi-factor authentication. We can also speak with the other modules of Heimdal and, for example, forbid elevation if the application we are trying to elevate has a CVSS score that is larger than 7 or equal to 7. And if this is forbidden, then the user would not be able to elevate that process. Again, also over here, you can see we can de-elevate and block elevation for users with a risk for infection. If I have a virus or anything like that, then my system will not allow me to elevate, and I will also be de-elevated if this is occurring on my system. We can assign a primary user that will be the one that are allowed to do the elevation, and we can do that on different criteria, and we can even edit these primary user later on. So this is really, again, how high you want the security, how you want to limit access to these machines. We have this user context elevation. This is the easiest way to give the users access to running things as an administrator, and then we can disable the Windows consent, meaning that they will not be prompted for the Windows UAC. They will only get the Heimdal that will trigger the request to either the admin of Heimdal or just auto-approve being able to run as administrator. So this is the easiest way to control these requests. We also have a way to enable machine learning auto-approval, meaning that if we enable this one, then we can say if a user, for example, 3 times requests access to a specific application or process, then we can automatically approve this based on these 3 approvals. Further on, we can go down here and select the auto mode of the elevation. The good thing about the auto mode is it works even without internet. Then it's just logging that you get access to the program that you want to run as administrator. We can also demand that there is elevation reason, meaning that you have to type in why do you need this access. So the IT people at the other end, the admins, can decide if your reason is good enough for giving you admin access to the specific program you're launching. If you don't want it to be automatically, you can use the approval via dashboard, There's also other features that I will not cover here to use these elevations, but the approval via the dashboard will trigger a request and an email to the admins that then can look at the request and then decide if they want to approve or not. If we go down here, we have the administrator session. That means that some tasks require a full administrator session. Then you can control the different settings here, like you could do with the run as administrator. And then we have the administrator session where you're running a complete session. You can differentiate in the settings here as you could above here. And you can also give it different extra options here, like you can demand an Azure login. If they have hybrid environment, then you can log in as an administrator to a system and then use your own credentials to get the administrator session without using the login and the password of the user you're supporting. Again, there is a way to close all processes started during an innovation when the session ends, that when you no longer have the rights to run as an administrator, everything will close down. So even if you open up some of the windows, they will also be closed down with this option here. The group here is the groups that you are allowing to get access to log in with their own credentials. So you can name several groups here if needed. This one here is often discussed if it should be enabled or disabled. The thing is that you need to decide if the users should be allowed to put their system on lock, meaning locking the screen, which we should always do if we walk away from the computer. But if you have this one ticked, then we will not de-elevate the processes when we lock the screen. And if you remove it, then if the screen is locked, then you will lose your administrative rights. So it's really something you should think about if you should enable or not, and discuss it with both us and with your security people, because if you have an application that takes a while to install, then it demands that you're sitting in front of the computer, so it's not locking the screen. The session length is really also something you can discuss. Normally, I say if you take the lowest one, it's only 2 minutes. It's really hard to do anything in 2 minutes. So I recommend setting it at something like 30 minutes, and then you could also decide to give the users the right to extend the time they're using as administrator. And you can customize that in a lot of details here. If we allow the users to extend, then we can say, okay, they are allowed to ask for 5 minutes, and they can ask for 5 minutes extra 3 times. So that's what the user can request then. And then these 3 times will be approved by the administrator in the other end. And it's depending on the settings here as well. If it's the auto mode, then it will just automatically approve it. But if it's approval via dashboard, then it will trigger a request to the admins of Heimdal. You can also allow some groups to have admin rights to the local system. I really don't recommend doing that. I mean, less people having admin access to the devices is a much better to keep a secure platform. So normally we don't use that one, or don't recommend using that one. The one down here is a really nice feature, because especially when you take over existing installations, it can be a little bit hard to know what's going on at the endpoint. So here we can revoke existing local admin rights on the endpoint devices. That means that when we set this one, we will remove administrators on the endpoint devices and only allow access to the system using this PEDM module. So that's very nice in order to control what's going on at the endpoint and ensure that they haven't created a local admin. So ask for administrative rights and then created a user with admin access. This function here will remove it. And we also have a possibility here to enforce token refresh, meaning rebooting, so all the existing admin processes are removed for the system and everything will go through the Heimdal interface. Of course, again, you can preserve users if you want and make sure they can get access if someone is really in demand of always having an admin account. But I really would encourage to use the full functionality of the PEDM module. When you're using security like this, it can be a little bit a challenge to start some of the application. especially because of a lot of the applications in, for example, Windows 11 is used with shortcuts, and it can be a little bit challenging running, for example, command cmd.exe using a shortcut. So that's why we created a small agent menu where you can quickly launch and request access to these different applications. You can remove them or you can add them, and you can even create your own tools in the fast menu here, so you don't have to look to find the actual application or process that you want to launch with administrative rights. When you have done all your testing and all your settings, then you need to do an upgrade group policy here to save everything. If you want to delegate the access, let's say, for example, the IT department, they are approving it themselves, so it wouldn't make sense to use the approval via dashboard. Then you could assign them a policy. So this is a policy based on a group membership in, for example, AD or Azure AD, and then they will get a policy where they don't need to use the approval via dashboard. So by that, you can use, for example, AD or Azure AD to assign the different policies and differentiate the settings for the different groups. So you could create a policy for IT department, you could create a policy for C-level people, you could create a policy for developers and so on, and then differentiate the different settings here, try to achieve what each group are requiring in these settings here. So as you can see, the PEDM module is not only giving you access as an administrator to your endpoint devices, it actually really controlling what you can do on an endpoint device and protecting it on a process level, which is really handy with all the new things coming in. You see in the news right now, a lot of dangerous files, dangerous programs are being spread. So this is really taking the protection to the next level. I hope you enjoyed this session, and I hope to see you another time.